Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this conference today. I wish I could be in Kigali with you personally, but given that that is not possible, I'll be happy to engage with you on these issues by video conference after my presentation. I want to do three things today. I want to talk about how a graduation approach can enhance social protection impacts. Second, I want to talk about how policymakers are increasingly demanding a graduation approach in social protection programs. And finally, I want to talk about the importance of comprehensive and integrated approaches. In my presentation, I'll follow the definition of social protection as a set of transfers and services that help individuals and households confront risk and adversity and ensure a minimum standard of dignity and well-being throughout the life cycle. And I'll focus on the idea that while social protection mainly aims to tackle vulnerability and poverty and social exclusion, we see that it can also contribute to household social and economic development and also contribute to pro-poor and inclusive economic growth. Now, I want to look at the framework for transformative social protection, where we see that simple benefits provide social protection and insurance-based mechanisms can prevent a further decline into poverty. But both of these kinds of instruments can also promote economic well-being. A great-grandmother in Colomo who receives a social cash transfer might use these benefits to hire local youth from her village to cultivate the land around her house with maize, tripling the food value of the transfer. She doesn't have labor power, but she's able to use the social transfer in a way that is promotive. Now, graduation means different things to different people. And for some, it's exit from social protection programs. And that can be exogenous, that is, on a fixed time schedule, or it can be endogenous. It can depend on the household's poverty status or the way they lift themselves out of poverty and out of eligibility for the program. But graduation to others means a graduation into a sustainable livelihood, a development of assets and capabilities that enables the household, even while they stay in the social protection program, to develop a more sustaining livelihood. And yet for others, it means a dynamic deepening of developmental impact. Social protection has a lot of impacts, including reducing poverty and vulnerability, but social protection can also expand a poor household's access to labor markets or livelihoods, to human capital development. At a national level, social protection can build social cohesion. It can help countries deal with economic shocks. It can help enable a government to put in place pro-poor and inclusive economic reforms. All of these contribute more broadly to developmental impact. I want to focus on this last definition, graduation as the dynamic deepening of the developmental impact of social protection programs. And one of the best examples I know is BRAC's Challenging the Frontiers of Poverty Reduction. This asset transfer program involves a multi-sectoral approach to building capabilities, including financial inclusion, including social transfers, including training and capacity building, as well as an asset transfer. And this graph that you see documents the dynamic deepening of development that we see over time from this program. The first three bars there in the chart represent for the first cohort that began in the program in 2007, and how many of these households had achieved a set of developmental indicators developed by BRAC that represents graduation. That is a collection of indicators of assets and capabilities that represent development for that household. At the end of the first year of the program, 74% of the households had achieved this index. And then after the program ended, a year later, when BRAC's monitoring process went back to these households, 82% of these households had achieved this index. And 2 years after the program ended, 93%. In a typical social protection program that aims at promotion, like a public works program, often households fall right back into poverty at the end of the program. BRAC's initiative demonstrates a sustainability of impact. The subsequent 2 years of cohorts involved in the program demonstrated a similar deepening of this developmental impact over time. Now, Rachel Sabates-Wheeler and Stephen Devereaux wrote a paper a couple years ago looking at some of the constraints to graduation. Some of these are based on design, and this conference is going to focus on a number of these issues over the next few days. Sometimes benefits are too small or too short-term or erratic, or there isn't enough support within the program for livelihoods promotion. Sometimes it's because that's not a priority. These are issues that can be tackled at a micro level. But graduation also requires a macro framework, a coordination of a range of government interventions that support developmental impact. Sometimes the economy is characterized by chronic poverty or long-term structural unemployment, and so households cannot easily graduate into more sustaining livelihoods. Sometimes there's a lack of human capital services and other social services that enable households to build their capabilities. And sometimes the shocks that hit the economy and the society are too deep and too pervasive for households to graduate out of poverty in a sustainable sort of way. A simple graduation program will not tackle these more systemic problems. I want to identify this idea of a development planning framework, a way of integrating social protection within a broader planning framework for maximizing developmental impact. The matrix you see in front of you is a kind of input-output matrix, where the inputs are different government policies and programs, and the outputs are the key public objectives that the government is looking for, like poverty reduction, but also things like economic growth and development. Dynamic deepening of development requires two things: intersectoral linkages, ensuring that different social protection programs work together to maximize developmental impact. For example, combining cash transfer programs with social health insurance initiatives. Cash transfers provide households with the liquidity they need to pay the premium on social insurance programs. And social insurance programs provide the protection against catastrophic health shocks that cash transfers alone cannot protect against. Also, there are intersectoral linkages. Social protection increases the effectiveness of government programs in education, in health, and livelihoods development. And these initiatives, in turn, provide greater protection against vulnerability and are often very effective in tackling poverty. Let me conclude with a few key messages here. Social protection focused on pure provision has limited developmental impact. The poor often fall right back into poverty when they exit these programs. A graduation approach can enhance the sustainability of social protection impacts. Second, the social protection approach with a graduation focus has the capacity to enable and empower the poorest, enable them to achieve more sustaining livelihoods. And finally, when these programs are embedded within a development planning framework with integrated and comprehensive approaches, they can maximize impact. Thank you.